The twin suns burned over the desert planet of Orvion. The air was dry, and the sand shimmered like glass. In the middle of the marketplace, a young alien girl stood in chains. Her skin pale blue, her silver eyes filled with fear. She was no more than 10 years old, small, shaking. Her wrists bruised where the metal bit into her skin. Around her, alien traders shouted prices, waving whips and pointing at her like she was nothing more than an animal. "Fresh slave, good worker, strong for her age," one shouted. Dragging her forward, the crowd laughed. Some threw small coins, others just stared. The girl wanted to scream, but her voice was gone. Her throat dry, her name was Lyra, but no one cared. Then, through the crowd, a tall figure appeared. His clothes were simple, covered with travel dust. His eyes were human, brown, calm. And strange to see in that part of the galaxy. Humans were rare, almost forgotten. The traders stopped yelling for a moment, watching him as he walked closer. His name was Ethan, and he moved like someone who had seen too much of war and loss. He looked at the girl, then at the trader. "How much for her?" His voice was steady but cold. The trader laughed. "You can't afford her, human. You don't belong here." But Ethan didn't move. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal coin. It glowed faintly, an ancient Terran credit chip. Rare and priceless, the laughter stopped. The crowd went silent. The trader's eyes widened, greed flashing in them. He took the coin quickly, snapping his fingers for the guards to release the girl. "She's yours, human," he said with a grin. "But don't expect her to last long." The chains fell and Lyra fell to her knees. Her body was weak, her eyes half closed. Ethan knelt beside her, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "You're free now," he said softly, but she didn't understand the word. Her people had no word for free. He lifted her in his arms and walked through the staring crowd. Some whispered that the human had lost his mind. Others watched in silence, wondering why a man would waste money on a broken slave. But Ethan didn't care. He carried her through the heat until the market was far behind. When night came, he built a small camp near the rocks, lighting a tiny fire. He gave her water, clean and cold. She drank greedily, coughing as the water ran down her chin. "Easy," he said with a small smile. "You're safe now." Lyra looked at him, her voice a whisper. "Why?" she asked. Her words were broken, heavy with fear. Ethan looked at the stars, then back at her. "Because no one should live in chains," he said simply. She stared at him, her mind trying to understand. For her whole short life, she had only seen cruelty and pain. This was the first time someone had spoken kindly to her. She touched the edge of the blanket he gave her, feeling its softness, then whispered, "My name." "Lyra, Lyra," Ethan repeated. "It's a good name." He gave her a small piece of food, warm and soft, and she ate slowly, afraid it might disappear. When she finished, she sat quietly beside the fire, watching him clean his blaster. His movements were calm, practiced. She noticed a scar running across his hand. "Deep, old and human. Where will we go?" she asked in a small voice. Ethan looked at the flames. "Somewhere safe," he said. "Far from this place," she nodded, though she didn't understand what safe meant either. But when she looked at his face, tired but kind, she believed him. Later that night, when Ethan slept under the cold sky, Lyra couldn't rest. She sat awake, the fire flickering over her small face. She remembered the laughter of the traders, the heat of the chains, and then the man who freed her. Her tiny hands clenched in the blanket, and she whispered a promise to the stars. "I'll never forget you, human." Above them, the twin moons crossed paths, casting light over the desert. The sand around them shimmered like silver, and somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the sound of chains breaking, faint but real. For the first time in her life, Lyra slept without fear while beside her. The last human on that world kept watch, silent and steady, knowing deep inside that this small act of kindness would echo far beyond the stars. The next morning, the sun rose over the endless dunes, painting the sky with red and gold. The wind was cold. Whispering across the sand like ghosts, Ethan stood beside the small campfire, packing his bag while Lyra watched him silently, her thin arms wrapped in the blanket he had given her. She looked so small against the wide desert. Almost lost in it, they had no ship, no safe road. Only old maps and Ethan's experience from years as a soldier and wanderer. The traders had seen his face, and they would come for him. He knew it. Every step had to be careful, every move silent. They started walking before the suns climbed high. Ethan carried a small scanner in one hand. His blaster in the other, Lyra followed close, her feet sinking in the soft sand. "Don't fall behind," he said gently. "There might be raiders out here." She nodded quickly, trying to match his long steps. Hours passed. The heat grew sharp, but Ethan didn't stop. When she stumbled, he gave her his hand. When she coughed, he gave her water. His voice was calm, steady, always sure. She began to trust the sound of it. In a world that had always hurt her, his voice felt like shelter. That night they reached a small cave hidden under a cliff. Ethan started a small fire and handed her a piece of old ration bread. "It's not much," he said, "but it will keep us alive." Lyra ate slowly, staring at him. "Why help me?" she asked again, her voice trembling. Ethan looked into the fire, the flames dancing in his tired eyes. "Because I couldn't walk away," he said softly. "Once, someone helped me too." Lyra didn't understand everything, but she felt something warm in her chest. It was strange. She had never felt this kind of care before, not from anyone. Days turned into weeks. They crossed dead rivers and cracked plains. Lyra grew stronger. She learned how to hide from scanners, how to build small fires, and how to walk quietly in the dark. Ethan taught her how to read the stars. "They don't lie," he said, pointing upward. "Follow the brightest one. It always shows the way home." One evening, as they rested near the ruins of an old satellite tower, Ethan checked his wrist device. "They're getting closer," he said. His voice low, Lyra's heart raced. "Who?" she whispered. "The ones who sold you," he replied. "They don't like losing property." That night, the stars seemed dimmer. The desert wind grew harsh, carrying voices, mechanical and cruel. "Search drones." Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. "Run," he said sharply. They ran through the dark, sand kicking under their feet, blaster fire flashing in the distance. Ethan turned, fired once, twice, and one of the drones fell, smoking, but the others kept coming. The sound of engines roared over the dunes. Lyra was breathing hard, tears in her eyes. "I can't," she gasped. Ethan knelt and lifted her, carrying her despite his bleeding arm. They reached the edge of an old forest. Strange black trees rising like shadows. Ethan set her down. "Go east," he said. "Keep running until you see blue water." Lyra shook her head, clutching his sleeve. "No, I won't leave you." Ethan smiled faintly, even as the sound of the enemy ships grew louder. "You must, Lyra. You'll die if you stay." He placed his hand gently on her head. "You're stronger than you think." Tears streamed down her face. "Please," she begged, "come with me." He looked into her silver eyes, full of fear and hope, and whispered, "One day, you'll understand." Then he turned and walked toward the sound of engines, blaster in hand. Lyra watched him disappear into the smoke and light. The explosions lit the sky and her heart broke. She ran, crying, the stars blurring above her. Every sound echoed his voice, calm, brave, human. When she finally reached the river, she fell to her knees, shaking. She looked back at the horizon where the fire still burned. "I'll come back," she whispered. "I promise." The night was silent again, only the wind answered, carrying the faint smell of smoke and metal. Far away in the ashes of the desert, Ethan stood wounded but alive, taken by armored guards, bound in iron cuffs. He looked toward the stars where he knew the girl had escaped, and whispered, "Run far, Lyra. Live in that quiet moment under two dying suns." 2 lives were torn apart, but a promise was born. A promise that would take 20 years to keep. The years passed like shadows across the stars. The little girl who once cried in the desert was gone. In her place stood a woman with sharp eyes and calm strength. Her name was still Lyra, but people now whispered it with respect and fear. She had grown up among rebels, hidden deep within the broken moons of the Aveni system. They taught her to fight, to lead, to survive. But no one taught her how to forget every night. She dreamed of a man with brown eyes and a calm voice, the human who freed her. She remembered his words, "You're stronger than you think," and they became the flame that guided her through the dark. The galaxy had changed. Empires rose and fell. New rulers hunted humans, calling them dangerous relics of an old war. Some said humans were extinct. Others said they were monsters. But Lyra knew at least one human still lived, the one who saved her. She searched every system she could, stealing old records, hacking military databases, and bribing smugglers, but no trace of Ethan appeared. His name was erased, his ship destroyed, his planet forgotten. Still, she refused to stop. One night, while the rebel camp slept under the dim light of a dying moon, Lyra sat alone by the fire. She opened a small metal pendant she always wore. Inside it was a tiny chip, a piece of the Terran coin Ethan once used to buy her freedom. She kept it close to her heart. It was proof that kindness once existed in the galaxy. A voice broke the silence. "Commander Lyra," it was Tovan, her second in command. "The High Lords are planning to enslave another colony. Our spies say they're moving tomorrow." Her eyes turned cold. "Then we move tonight," she said, standing. Her armor gleamed under the pale moonlight, etched with symbols of hope. The rebels followed her without question. When dawn came, fire rained across the sky. Lyra led the assault herself, striking the slave ships before they could lift off. She moved like lightning, silent and precise. Her blaster never missed. Her soldiers called her the Queen of Shadows, though she was not yet a queen. When the last enemy ship fell, she walked among the freed captives, helping a small alien child to stand. The girl looked up and whispered, "Why did you save us?" Lyra paused, staring at the frightened child, and for a moment she saw her younger self. "Because someone once saved me," she said softly. After that battle, her fame spread across worlds. Her name became a symbol, a leader who freed slaves, who fought tyrants, who never bowed to anyone. But the more victories she won, the more the emptiness inside her grew. Sometimes, when she looked at the stars after battle, she imagined Ethan somewhere out there, still alive, still watching. Maybe he had found peace, maybe he had died long ago. But she always whispered to the stars, "I'm still keeping my promise." 20 years after that day in the desert, she finally returned to her home planet Orvion, where it all began. The market where she was once sold was now ruins. The air still smelled of dust and heat. She walked among the broken stones, memories pressing heavy in her chest. She knelt where the old auction platform once stood and placed her hand on the ground. "You freed me here," she whispered. "One day I'll find you, I swear it." Behind her, one of her guards spoke. "Your Majesty, the people wait." She turned slowly, the sun's shining behind her. Her voice was calm, steady. "Let them wait," she said. "A queen who forgets who she was cannot lead anyone." As the wind rose, lifting the sand into glowing waves, Lyra stood tall, her silver eyes shining. She had become everything she once feared, everything she once dreamed of. But her journey was not over. Somewhere out there across the stars, the last human waited, and she would find him. The sky of a Venus burned red that morning. War drums echoed across the floating cities. The High Lords and cruel rulers who had enslaved millions prepared their final stand. Their armies filled the horizon, shining in gold and black armor. But above them, like a storm made of light, came Lyra's fleet. For 20 years, she had built this army in secret, ship by ship, world by world. Every soldier followed her not because of her crown, but because of her courage. They called her the voice of freedom. And when she spoke, even hardened warriors felt hope. Her flagship, the Dawnfire, hovered above the enemy's capital. Lyra stood at its command bridge, her armor gleaming silver and blue, her eyes fixed on the burning planet below. "Today," she said softly, "we end the chains." Her generals watched her in silence. They knew she was more than a commander. She was a symbol, a living legend. The screens around her showed battles raging across the cities, explosions lighting the night. But Lyra's focus never wavered. "Launch the ground teams," she ordered. "No mercy for the slavers. Protect the civilians." Her voice was calm but sharp. Like the edge of a blade, hours later, smoke covered the skies. The High Lord's defenses fell one by one. In the final tower, the Grand Lord himself waited, surrounded by guards and pride. He had once sold her as a child. He had forgotten her face. But she had never forgotten his. Lyra entered the throne hall, her footsteps echoing. The Grand Lord laughed. "So the little slave became a soldier," he sneered. "You think you can rule?" She raised her blaster, her voice cold as ice. "No," she said. "I can lead," a single shot echoed. The hall went silent and the golden banners fell. When the smoke cleared, the people of Venice gathered outside the burning palace. The rebels raised their weapons high, shouting her name. "Lyra! Lyra!" The sound rolled through the air like thunder. But she didn't smile. She stood on the palace balcony, her armor cracked, her eyes tired for all her victories. Her heart still carried one question. Was Ethan still alive? That night, under the light of the twin moons, she walked alone through the ruins, stepping over broken chains. The city was free, yet she felt no peace. Her people had crowned her queen, but her thoughts were still with a man lost to time. Inside her chamber, she opened the pendant she always wore. The tiny piece of the Terran coin glimmered softly. She held it between her fingers and whispered, "I did it, Ethan, I freed them all," but her voice cracked. "Where are you now?" Her advisor entered quietly, bowing low. "Your Majesty," he said, "the people wish to see you. They want their queen." Lyra turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "A queen?" she repeated softly. "No, not yet." He looked confused. "Then what should we call you, my queen?" She smiled faintly. "Call me Lyra, the one who remembers." The next morning she stood before her people. Millions gathered across the city squares and hovering platforms, banners of silver light waving in the wind. She raised her hand and the crowd fell silent. "My people," she began, her voice steady and full of warmth. "We are free today, but freedom is not just the end of chains, it's the beginning of compassion. There was a time when I was no one, a child with no name, but one person, not of our world, gave me hope. A human, a stranger who believed I was worth saving. He showed me that kindness is stronger than power, that mercy can change fate." The crowd listened, quiet and moved. Some whispered that humans were only legends. But Lyra's eyes told them otherwise. "This new world," she continued, "will be built not on fear but on unity. We will not forget what was done to us, but we will never become like them." When she finished, the city erupted in cheers, the skies filled with lights, fireworks painting the night. But as she watched the celebration from her balcony, her smile faded. She looked up at the stars, whispering, "I kept my promise, Ethan, now it's your turn to come back." And somewhere in the cold distance of the galaxy, deep within a forgotten prison, a tired human opened his eyes as if he had heard her voice through the void. It had been 20 long years since the desert. The galaxy called her Queen Lyra of a Venus now. But even the title of queen could not silence the ache in her heart. She had freed millions, ended wars, rebuilt cities, but one face still haunted her dreams. The human who once saved her. One night, deep within her palace, she received a secret message. The messenger was a scarred smuggler, nervous and shaking as he stood before her. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "I found something impossible." He handed her a small hologram chip. Lyra activated it. The image flickered. A dark cell, a man in chains, his face tired and thin, his hair gray, but the eyes, those human eyes, made her breath stop. "Ethan," she whispered. Her advisor stepped forward in shock. "A human? That's not possible. They're extinct," but Lyra's heart was already burning with certainty. "No," she said. "He's alive, and I'm going to bring him home." Within hours, she prepared her fleet. No one dared stop her. She was their queen. But tonight, she was something else. She was the girl who owed a life. The journey took them to the edge of known space, a place whispered about in fear, the Black Spire prison. It was a fortress built into an asteroid, surrounded by dying stars and clouds of toxic gas. No one had ever escaped it. The Empire had used it to bury their darkest secrets, people they wanted the galaxy to forget. As the fleet approached, alarms blared inside the prison. Lyra stood at the bridge window, her eyes fierce. "No fire," she ordered. "We go in quiet." Her ship, the Dawnfire, cloaked itself and drifted through the shadows. The guards below had no idea that a queen was descending from the heavens. Lyra led the landing team herself, armored in black and silver, her blaster drawn. They entered through a broken maintenance shaft, crawling through smoke and dripping pipes. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The walls hummed with energy. Ancient machines still alive, still watching. When they reached the lower levels, Lyra's heart pounded. Each cell they passed was filled with broken souls, forgotten prisoners who had stopped dreaming long ago. Some whispered her name in disbelief, thinking she was an angel. Finally, they reached the last corridor. A single door stood ahead, rusted and sealed with energy locks. The smuggler's voice trembled. "That's the one, cell 49B. Lyra stepped forward. "Open it," she said, Her soldiers hesitated. "Your Majesty, it could be a trap." She glared at them. "Then let it be my trap," and pressed her palm to the scanner. Sparks flew, the metal hissed, and the door slid open with a deep hollow sound. Inside, it was dark. The smell of rust and old blood filled the air. In the corner, a man sat chained to the wall. His head hung low, his hair long and gray, his body thin like a shadow. Lyra's voice broke. "Ethan?" The man stirred, his chains rattling. Slowly he lifted his head. His eyes met hers, tired, sunken, but still warm. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice rough. "You grew up." Tears filled her eyes. She rushed forward, falling to her knees beside him. "You're alive," she said, touching his face. "You're really alive." He smiled weakly. "Didn't think anyone would come." She gripped the chains, pulling hard. "I promised I'd come back," she said. "Now it's my turn to save you." Her soldiers cut the locks, the sound echoing through the cell. As the chains fell, Ethan slumped forward, weak but free. Lyra held him, whispering, "You saved me from darkness, now I'll take you home." Outside, alarms began to scream. Guards flooded the halls. Lyra stood tall, her blaster flashing, covering Ethan as her team carried him toward the ship. The prison shook under the blast of their engines. As the dawn fire rose into the storm, Lyra stood by the window, watching the prison crumble behind them. Ethan lay in the medbay, eyes half open, whispering, "You shouldn't have come for me." She looked at him with tears and fire in her eyes. "I told you I never forget promises." The stars stretched before them, endless and bright. The forgotten prison disappeared into the void, and for the first time in 20 years, Lyra felt whole again. Inside the medical bay of the dawn fire, soft blue lights glowed as machines hummed gently. Ethan lay on a healing bed, his body weak, but his mind slowly waking up. It had been so long since he'd felt warmth, clean air, and a soft voice. Lyra sat beside him, armor removed, dressed in a simple robe. Her crown was gone, but her presence still felt powerful. She watched the monitors quietly, afraid to look away, afraid he might vanish again like a dream. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking under the soft lights. His voice cracked. "Where am I?" "You're safe," she said gently. "You're home, Ethan." He turned his head and looked at her, really looked. Her face was older now, calm, graceful, and strong, but those silver eyes were the same, full of the same fire and kindness. "Lyra," he whispered. "You found me." She smiled through tears. "I never stopped searching." Ethan tried to sit up, but pain shot through his side. She reached out quickly, holding him steady. "You need time," she said. "That place almost killed you." He gave a small chuckle. "Didn't think I'd live long enough to see you again." Lyra looked down at his frail hands covered in old scars. "You gave me everything when I had nothing. Now it's my turn to give back." As the ship sailed through the stars, the crew gave him space. All of them knew who he was now. The mysterious human who once saved their queen. Soldiers saluted him with respect. Doctors treated him like a hero from a lost age, but Ethan didn't feel like a hero. He felt broken, out of place, too old for a galaxy that had moved on. One evening he stood on the viewing deck, holding onto the rail as stars passed like rivers of light. Lyra joined him silently. "It's changed, hasn't it?" he said. "This galaxy, these people, I barely recognize it." She nodded. "It changed because of you, Ethan." He turned toward her, confused. "Me?" "Yes," she said, her voice soft but clear. "You saved one girl, just one. But that girl grew up and tore down empires, built a new world, all because you showed her what kindness was." Ethan didn't know what to say. He looked at her again, seeing not just the girl he rescued, but a leader, a queen, and something more. Someone who never forgot him. "Why didn't you give up?" he asked. "Because you never did," she said. "Even when you were chained, even when the world turned its back on you, you still believed I was worth saving." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars move like slow fire. Back on Venice, the capital was being prepared. News of the Queen's return spread across the system. But when the royal gates opened, it was not just the Queen who walked down the grand steps. Beside her walked a man in simple robes, aged but steady. Ethan, the last human. The people gasped. Some fell to their knees, others whispered in shock. A human? But they were extinct. Lyra raised her hand, her voice strong. This is Ethan, the man who saved your queen when she was nothing. Without him there would be no Venice, no freedom, no me. The crowd stood silent for a long moment. Then a thunderous cheer rose like a wave. Banners flew, people cried, and the past and future met in that moment. Later, in the royal garden, away from the noise, Ethan sat beneath a silver-leaf tree. Lyra joined him, offering a warm drink. You don't have to stay, she said quietly. You've done more than anyone ever expected. Ethan looked at the stars above them, then at her. I didn't come back to leave again, he said. Besides, I want to see what kind of galaxy you're building. Lyra smiled, gently placing her hand over his. Then stay, not as a prisoner, not as a legend, but as my friend, or maybe something more. Ethan chuckled. Let's start with friend. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh only he had ever heard from her, and as the night sky shimmered above them, Lyra and Ethan sat side by side, two souls from different worlds, forever changed by a single act of kindness. Now reunited in a galaxy they helped shape together. The great day arrived with skies full of color. Silver banners flew from every tower and bells echoed through the capital. The entire planet of Venice stood still, waiting, watching. Ships from distant worlds arrived in the sky, carrying rulers, rebels, scholars, and warriors, all gathered for one reason. Queen Lyra was about to announce the future of the galaxy. But there was another reason too, whispered in every street and market. The human is alive, they said. The one who saved her. Inside the royal palace, Lyra stood before a mirror, dressed in a robe of midnight blue trimmed with stardust thread, but her expression wasn't royal. It was thoughtful, quiet. She looked at her reflection, then turned to the door. Is he ready? She asked. He's waiting, the guard replied. In the garden, Ethan stood under the same silver-leaf tree where he and Lyra had spoken weeks ago. His strength was returning, his steps firmer each day, but his heart still beat with disbelief. All this, the palace, the crowds, the glory, for him. Lyra walked to him slowly, her voice soft. It's time. He looked into her eyes. You sure about this? She nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. Together, they walked to the sky balcony, a massive platform floating above the capital. The people below cheered as they appeared. The moment felt heavy, sacred. Lyra raised her hand and silence fell. People of Venice, she began, her voice clear and strong. For years we fought for freedom. For years we believed no one would come to save us. She paused, looking beside her at Ethan. But someone did, she continued. Not a soldier, not a king, just one man, a human, who chose mercy over silence. Ethan saved one life, mine, and that one act changed everything. The crowd listened, many with tears in their eyes. Today, she said, I offer the galaxy a gift, not gold, not ships, but something greater. Today, I create a new alliance, one that will protect all who are forgotten, one that welcomes every race and honors the lost race of Earth. The banners behind her changed shape, revealing a new symbol, a circle of stars around a human hand and an alien flame. We will call it the Accord of Kindred, she declared, and its first seat belongs to Ethan, the last human, not as a guest, but as a founder. Gasps rose across the city. Then a roar of cheers shook the skies. Ethan stepped forward, stunned. I'm not a leader, he whispered to her. You were when it mattered most, she replied. And that's what makes you worthy. He took the microphone, clearing his throat. His voice was rough but steady. I never wanted to be remembered, he said. I just couldn't watch a child suffer. That's all I did. He looked at the millions of faces watching him. But if that small choice made this possible, then I ask all of you, do the same. Every day, choose kindness. Help someone, no matter how small it seems. There was silence, not of doubt, but of deep respect. Lyra turned to him and handed him a small box. He opened it, finding inside a metal pin, the old Terran coin he once used to buy Lyra's freedom, now forged into a symbol of peace. She pinned it to his chest herself. This was the start of everything, she whispered. He looked at her. Then at the stars above. Then let's build something that lasts. That night, across every screen and planet, the image spread. A human standing beside an alien queen, united not by blood or power, but by choice. In the quiet after the celebration, Lyra and Ethan stood on the balcony alone, watching lights dance across the sky. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day? She asked. Ethan smiled. No, he said, because I did. And beneath the endless stars, where once there was only pain and chains, there was now hope. A new world born from an old kindness, and the galaxy would never be the same again.